Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. I lost a bet, Lauren.
Uh-oh.
I'm not in the radio station. I'm not at my house. Part of the Duke's Mayo Bowl. If NC State lost to Maryland, I had to drive to Maryland, which is where I am right now. At least I get Natty Bow out of it, right? Unopened, by the way. But when this Panic Room is done, I'm going to pop this open. I bet Dave Doran probably wants to pop open a beer or the good bourbon after this season where the offense once again let this team down.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, because the stuff around the Duke's Mayo Bowl and the broadcast and everything, honestly, I think it took me till the fourth quarter to realize that the game was near unwatchable.
Oh, it was
because
terrible.
of all of the enjoyable shenanigans
Sure.
that had been surrounding it, like the dude who chugged the whole jar of mayo. You know what I mean? Like eating it out of a jar. We had people dipping macaroons in mayo
You've
for some
got the
reason.
mascot. My brother who lives in Orlando now actually is he came to visit and I hung out with him a little bit this week. But he drove to Charlotte this morning to go to Duke's Mayo Bowl. He's got his T-shirt. He was trying to find like a commemorative little thing of mayo. He was really mad that he couldn't find one. So you're right. Like the Duke's Mayo Bowl itself is like this. Credit to them. They've done an incredible job making this a spectacle, right? And Loxley, I think he kind of got away with it wearing the big giant hat, which is all the trend these days when the mayo is dumped. Like, come on, man, that's a cop out. Like,
Well,
let's get the mayo
Shane Beamer
on.
set the tone because he was wearing a hat.
But not that size hat. Come on, right?
But you know what? Credit to him. Like, kudos. It's funny, at least. And that's the thing. Like, the Duke's Mayo Bowl is enjoyable, fun. Like, shout out to the Charlotte Sports Commission and, like, our friend Miller Yoho, who does their social media and did it for the Belt Bowl. And it's top notch. And they've just leaned into kind of the silliness of it all. And I don't know that there's like a more fun bowl game out there right now. That just,
But
it's
the
awesome.
game, like you said, though, the game itself was not very good. Look, there's reasons for that. You kind of get a grab bag for bowl games, and Carolina and Duke dealt with this as well. And we talked about it earlier in the week. You got some guys who have opted out who are going pro. You got some guys who have opted out because they're going to transfer. You got coaching changes and everything else. But that shouldn't, and I'll say this about State. Bowl games can be a microcosm of your season.
They can be.
Regardless of the circumstances. Things can still play out like they have all season.
Carolina, a tease.
And their defense, not their defense theoretically having them set up for success, but no. In this particular case, we can finally answer the question, what would happen if you put Carolina's offense and NC State's defense together? What kind of team would you have?
Man,
Right?
The thing for me is,
of course, who gets to coach that team? That's a question. That is
as a whole, you're right. Like as a whole this season, right? Obviously, Carolina's defense was not close to up to par. I did think they played well beyond their level in the Oregon game, but still, you're right. That is kind of the summary of the whole season for Carolina. And I think a lot of us, myself included, would look at the offense and what it was able to do and Drake May and how special he was and go, okay, this was a waste. And I think you can do the exact, because you just needed your defense to be okay. You didn't need them to be amazing. They needed
State,
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Where
it's the opposite.
16 points should have been enough against Maryland today.
No.
Okay.
Yes. I mean,
so they had quick 3 and outs. They had trips to the red zone that produced field goals, as Steve Logan used to scream at me in gold back in the day. That's -4. That's a -4 on the board, not 3 in the grand scheme of things. So, and it also shows you too, and it's one thing that I don't like doing during a week to week, because after the Carolina win, it was this big conversation about Ben Finley. Where was Ben Finley all this time? Well, Ben Finley had weeks to prepare for a bowl game and still looked like a guy who was where he was probably supposed to be on the depth chart for this past season.
Here's the weird thing about him about that to me, though. I don't know if this has come out since. I haven't seen it yet, but like, is MJ Morris, was he just too hurt? If so, why did he split first team reps the whole time?
Don't know.
Like, what's with that? I don't.
Maybe it was an opportunity to see what they had in Ben Finley for next season. Who knows? Who knows what the reasoning is? My point is that it's a classic situation that we sometimes get into, like, for instance, the Carolina Panthers is a prime example of this. They're always looking for the next quarterback. And if they have like 2 weeks in a row where they look pretty good, well, clearly we have to commit the future to this one particular guy. They're doing it with Sam Darnold right now as we get into the rest of the last 2 weeks of the season. And I feel like that's been NC State over the last couple of years. And I know there's history behind it because NC State has had a history of good quarterbacks. So when you see a guy who shows you that flash, well, then therefore he has to be the guy. And Devin Leary, unfortunately, with the starts and the stops and the injuries and everything, COVID as well, he never really got a true case to make in where he could stand with NC State quarterbacks. But then that then started this path of conversation that we've done with NC State over the years of, well, then who's the next guy? Well, they brought in Jack Chambers. Well, clearly he's not the guy. I think most people were in agreement on that. All right, well, MJ Morris showed flashes. Well, he clearly has to be the guy. Well, is he hurt? Is he not hurt? Why didn't he play today? Well, Ben Finley, he was spectacular in the North Carolina game. What a story. And it's still a great story at the end of the season. An amazing arc from the last time he played Carolina to the final game of the season where he was
maybe they should just keep him on the roster to play against Carolina.
And maybe that's the case.
Like
but then
pitcher.
We saw the limitations. We saw the limitations today with Ben Finley. We also saw limitations with the run game as well, which gets to the bigger picture.
The run game is a thing that has been under discussed in the whole quarterback conversation as we're looking for the quarterback and we're pointing fingers at the offensive coordinator. We're going, oh, hey, why can't you run the football anymore?
Right. That's a problem. Which gets us to what this offseason is going to be about. They've got a new offensive coordinator now that Tim Beck is off to go coach Coastal Carolina. Dave Doran is going to have an opportunity to assess where things have been with a core group for the last 2 to 3 seasons and wonder what worked, what didn't work. Are you going to modernize yourself, or what we've seen at NC State for a good chunk of this year is the feature, not the bug? Remember, we talked about this at the beginning of the season for the Wolfpack. They wanted to win a particular way. They wanted to get to a certain amount of points and then shut it down. And sometimes it worked. Like today, it did not. And 3 points just was not going to get it done. And the 3 and outs were not going to get it done. It's a larger point about this season. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's like you can look at it and just go, okay, what's the culprit here? And have we truly identified it, or is it a bunch of things? You know, is it the offense? Is it the philosophy? Is it the quarterback? I actually don't necessarily think it's the quarterback. I don't even know if you switch to MJ Morris the way the running game was going and with the offensive line banged up, because that's the only thing I can think of. If the offensive line's banged up and you think MJ Morris is your future and Ryan and Ben, God, I still do that with him. Ben Finley gets out there and wants to like put something good on tape and or like show that can compete for the job, right? Then you go with Ben Finley the whole time. But like maybe they didn't want to put him out there behind a banged up offensive line, because I don't know that it goes a whole lot differently. You can't run the ball, you can't get downfield passes going if your line's not blocking well. Like I'm not saying he made good decisions, he made some bad decisions, we all saw it, but like you want to why would they leave an immobile quarterback in there against whatever. Maybe he wasn't healthy enough to go.
I think you just touched on it.
Yeah.
It's a philosophy thing. It's something that I've been screaming a good chunk of the season, that it's a philosophy in how NC State wanted to win games. But Dave Doran's a young coach relative to his peers, and the good coaches will do an assessment in the offseason, and they'll figure out, okay, if we're going to take this program to another level, if we're going to take that next step, then we're going to change what we've done, because clearly what we've been doing only works to a point. Okay. Yeah. I'm not trying to put Dave Doran on that Nick Saban level, but the Nick Saban of 10 years ago is not the same Nick Saban of today. And he's much older than Dave Doran.
He's out there begging for the playoffs now. I'm just
kidding. Even Dabo, who is more along the same age peer group, you know, he reworked and he brought in guys to disrupt what he was trying to do, and it paid off with success. Now, there was money and infrastructure behind all of that. I get it's not an apples to apples comparison when I'm talking about top tier programs, but the point still remains that good coaches will reassess and bring in new voices to disrupt what was working to a point. Can they do something differently to get them to that next point, especially with the personnel changing and the changing nature of recruiting, along with the transfer portal and everything else? Because you can really change things around with one wide receiver who comes through the portal or a quarterback who comes through the portal. So I'll be curious to see, because they're bringing a new offensive coordinator and everything else, got a new offensive line guy. I get all that stuff. How
Maybe
much of it
Brennan
is
Armstrong joins him. We don't
maybe,
know.
maybe.
But we
I
saw,
want to
by
see
the
how
way,
much they
this year that
change.
Brennan can't do it if he doesn't have a good offensive line either. So, like,
Yep.
if you're not getting good line play, it really doesn't matter what plays you're calling. Well, it kind of does. You need to call it around that. But, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to be able to do much offensively in college football if you do not have at least a decent offensive line.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. So that's where NC State season is. You know, it's one of those glass half empty, glass half full situations for the Wolfpack. You can look at the injuries, specifically to Devin Leary, and how they went through a quarterback carousel there, but then also look at the fact that they had 4 different quarterbacks and 4 top 25 wins, right? Like it's a glass half empty, glass half full with the Wolfpack. Was it a great season for the Wolfpack, as Dave Dorn mentioned, at the end of the regular season after beating Carolina? No, it wasn't a great season.
Right.
Great seasons don't have head scratching losses to Syracuse. You know, like that's not in the mix.
Why are you picking on Syracuse and not Boston College?
I was going to get to that. Great seasons do not include head scratching senior day losses at Carter Finley Stadium against a bad Boston College team. Okay. By that, especially at that point, because you figured some things out theoretically.
And as you said too, right? Like they got the style of play gets you into close shaves, and nearly every single game with State was close. Like after non-conference play, basically every single game almost could have gone either way, essentially. So like it's great to be in those situations because you always have a chance to win, but that also means your opponent always has a chance to win. Like, you know, it's just, I don't know. The offense just needed to be okay this year with that defense being as special as it was. And I think that's what it is fair to look at as a missed opportunity. I don't know all the reasons behind it. Like, we're not in that room. We don't know.
Well, Gilio and I talked to Tim Beck, the outgoing offensive coordinator, after he took the Coastal Carolina job. And I asked him, like, okay, so walk us through the progression of how you eventually got to Ben Finley at the end of the year. And he even said straight up, he's like, you know, you go into seasons, you go in with a plan. The plan changes over time. You prepare your guys as you think you're preparing for these games and who's going to play. And playing Ben Finley never really was a thought. And again, this is a credit to Ben Finley for learning as much of the playbook as he needed to ahead of the Carolina game and executing the way that they did. And there's also the extra motivation of, you know, beating the rival and everything else.
Also, no offense. And you did credit to you. You did say this after that game. Carolina's pass defense was like one of the worst in the entire country. And I don't know, man. I'm a little concerned for Cade Klubnik now. I'm just saying. Because, like, he looked great against Carolina, but so did every other backup that played against them this year.
There's plenty of Carolina fans will tell you that everybody's best highlights at quarterback tended to be against that defense for the most part. So, and I guess that's where we can kind of close on this. You know, Carolina, in a lot of ways, and we talked about this in the last Panic Room. If you wanted a more in-depth conversation about that Carolina bowl loss, go check out the previous Panic Room. But NC State actually has you can say the same thing about the Wolfpack. Their season really does change within the context of the game to game. Their season completely changes if ECU misses a field goal at the end. The Carolina game, 2 years in a row now, it completely changes how you discuss the season based on the final play of the game. Last year at Carter Finley Stadium, it was a touchdown pass. This year it was yet again another missed field goal. And it shows you the margin for error for about 98% of college football programs. There is a very, very thin margin for error. And the frustration for Carolina fans is, man, if the defense just did X,
exactly,
maybe things turn around and you get to that 10-win mark. For NC State, it's the same thing. If the offense could just get out of neutral, then maybe that changes the Boston College. Maybe had they gone to MJ Morris earlier in the Syracuse game, things change and they win that game.
Yes.
But you can't do anything about it now. And that's why it gets back to my central point and what we title this Panic Room about. It's really up to Dave Dorn how much he wants to change the philosophy of this Wolfpack program going forward. Because Gilio and I talked about this a good bit, and we speculated a little bit on Panic Room. With the way the coaching carousel was going to unfold this season, it was entirely possible that Dave Dorn could have been in the mix for any number of jobs. But it actually ended up being a pretty chill coaching carousel in the grand scheme of things. Like the most obvious choices ended up going to the obvious schools, right down to Matt Rule taking the Nebraska job. So
it's good news for Duke as well on that front.
Yes, yes. So Dave Dorn is not going anywhere anytime soon. If he wants to be here a long time, then he has the contract to do so. He
Exactly.
can retool it for that next window of the Wolfpack, whenever that might be. But one thing you and I both know when it comes to the transfer portal, that window gets a lot quicker now based on who you can yank out of there.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I do think hiring a Nye is at least a partial signal to the fan base that, like,
Yep.
yes, I do want to try to score points. I promise. This isn't intentional. I don't like these games. I promise I don't. Like, I think that's his way of saying, no, I really do want to offense.
Yes.
I promise.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We didn't say anything problematic on this one, and I will go ahead and it's still closed, but I will open it up now that the season is over. Basketball season we'll really get into next week. Although, since we're talking about state and based on what happened at Pitt today, or I'm sorry, against Clemson today, maybe the basketball season's also over too. I don't know.
Well, okay. I just have State could have used some of those made field goals. I'm sorry.
All right,
but
Lauren,
I've got a Carolina. I've got a Carolina one too. Jeff Capel has more wins over UNC at Pitt. 3 more wins than he did while at school at Duke.
I'm ending this after that joke. We'll see y'all later in the week.